the president wandering off so that people can see if they're watching. It's meander in chief. Biden embarrasses U.S. with confused wanderings at World Conference. Now, I want to be fair to the president. He was coherent briefly at various times along, but my gosh, he's lost the ability to be a president, Ben,
That's
and I
that's
don't think there's any doubt about that.
I don't think there's any doubt about it at all. And meander in chief is, not quite to the level of Christopher Hitchens' reference to him as the great commuter, but
Ah!
but it's pretty high up there. Look, I just it's so embarrassing, and you see it reflected in the way that the other world leaders treat him. Giorgia Meloni trying to, basically, keep him from embarrassing himself, and then him putting on his aviators in slow motion. It seemed like to me this was a situation where you had this contrast of a European, group of leaders who are frankly, it's not like they're, super energetic or super young. It's just that they are what you expect from leaders. And he looks completely decrepit in the midst of them. And look, Hugh, I think we have to really have an open conversation about this as a country, because the question is not if he's going to finish out a second term. It's when Kamala Harris is going to become president if he's reelected. And I think that, it's just impossible to avoid that conversation now, and only the most partisan Democrats are the ones who are continuing to hold on to some kind of
Not
illusion
just
that it's not
them,
going to
but
happen.
also people who react very negatively. TDS is shorthand, right? Trump derangement syndrome. But I don't want to diminish the deep disgust or hatred that some people have that they base on their legitimate views. They can't overcome it, Ben. Now, I've seen a lot of people moving back to Trump because it's binary. Have you?
Oh, well, I mean, when it comes to my own voting pattern, Hugh, I don't really. I mean, I tend to throw my vote away. I'm a libertarian voter, and so it's one of these things where my vote doesn't really matter all that much. But I don't think that it's possible to go through the next 4 years with someone who looks like Biden leading us, and I think Kamala Harris is an absolute dolt. So, of course, I think it's better for the country if Donald Trump is back in the White House. I mean, there's just no question. I mean,
Yeah. I think he's going to win in a Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan wipeout of 1980 if they
yeah,
keep
I mean,
him.
I think that the truth is that this stuff is so obvious that it's impossible to avoid it. And I think that the media spinners who are continuing to try to pretend otherwise, that behind the scenes Joe Biden is this sharp as a tack guy, especially, Mika and Joe and some of these more prominent, people within the media who just go out there every day and defend him. They really can't, they don't have the power anymore to sway people's opinions because they can see it plain as day in front of their faces. And that's something that I think they may not realize yet, but the American people have realized.
So
And
I've
they've
done
already
5
gone.
GOP presidential nominee debates. I did 4 with CNN, 1 with NBC. I know what they're doing right now at CNN. They've got Mark Preston playing Trump. I do not know who they've got playing Biden. But I believe, out of sympathy that I feel for him, it's almost going to be impossible for Jake and Dana to not try and prop up the president and save him from embarrassing moments. And I don't know that he can make through 90 minutes unless President Trump enables him by interrupting and doing what he did in the first debate in 2020. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the things that I think is really important here is that Donald Trump doesn't get in his own way, that he allows Biden to sort of wrap himself up in all the things that we've seen him in his meandering ways over the past several years. And by the way, it's gotten worse. And it's not ageist to say this. I hear that sometimes from people, well, this is just ageism or something like that. No, people wear the age differently. Chuck Grassley is different than Joe Biden. They just don't have the same level of wear and tear on them mentally. And some people, frankly, are a lot quicker and able to respond at that age than others. My colleague Britt Hume, who I absolutely adore, is less than a year difference from Joe Biden, and that you wouldn't know that from the way that he's able to analyze politics and stay on top of things. And he himself has made reference to the fact that he even feels like he's slowing down. But I think everybody would much rather have someone working at his speed in the White House than working at Joe Biden's speed. It's just it's absolutely impossible. And I think when it comes to Jake and Dana, they may try to save face with this, and they may get plaudits from their colleagues for trying to do that. But I don't think they're going to be able to. I think that
it will ruin CNN forever. If they
really
save Donald Trump, they will be in the NBC hell with Republicans, which happened after the NBC fell off of the ladder forever. I can't remember what the occasion was. I'm trying to bring it back, but when they fired Ronna McDaniel, and they just basically declared they had a Politico-style uprising when Ben Shapiro was going to be an editor for a week. And so that always puts the mark of doomed on you. And you can't get it off unless you fire everyone and start over.
The other thing is, even if they're throwing him favors and trying to help him out in a sort of Candy Crowley way, I think that the other unavoidable question that has to be asked, that they're not going to be able to avoid asking, is to circle back to the debates in 2020 and say, Mr. President, you've maintained that you know nothing about your son's business dealings, that this laptop was Russian misinformation, disinformation, et cetera.
They'll never bring
It's now been introduced as evidence. We know that's not true. Would you like to go back and readdress that question?
Well, that's a great question, but they'll never ask that. I know this. They're just never going to ask that.
But it's a
do you
question
think they
America
will?
deserves the answer to. It really is.
They do, but they're not going to get it from Jake and Dana. It's because CNN is going to do the MSNBC light thing. Anyway, I got to move to a much more fun subject, Ben, and I may ask you to stay a second segment if you can. On 2 nights ago, the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I sat down, and I had a strong recommendation from Seth Mandel on the Commentary podcast that the show Tires was remarkably funny, and everyone should watch it.
It's vulgar humor. It's going to be on the edge, and it's not going to be something that I would necessarily recommend to my parents. But it's
funniest thing. No, you got to hold over because I got to talk about with this more, and we got to go to break. The funniest part of this is that Seth Mandel, father of 100 kids, with Bethany, and he does the Commentary pod with J Pod and with Abe Greenwald and with Christine Rosen and Matt Continenti. Seth earnestly told people, all right? So the demo of the Commentary podcast has got a lot of grandmas in it that are going to sit down and just have their eyes roll back.
Okay, well, that's funny, too. That's funny, too. Shane would appreciate that, I think.
We have a fed-up moment in the world, and by that I mean Donald Trump is pulling ahead across the country, and states like Virginia he's tied, where he got blown out before. Meanwhile, Macron in France has called a snap election, and the headline in the Financial Times this morning is Macron's party at risk of wipeout as left forms unity pact. And France is on the brink of something terrifying, and that's a New York Times editorial. Then we have a story out of Germany. Olaf Scholz probably will not be able to keep his coalition together because they can't agree. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak's going to get blown out in Great Britain, and the Tories may not even be the opposition. It might be Reform. And I think Trump's coming back. So, Ben, there are fundamental things afoot across the free world. What are they?
Well, I think a number of factors are at play here. But really what I think you're seeing is that the technocratic hold that a lot of these different leaders had, in many cases inherited from prior coalitions and the like, is absolutely falling apart. People are not happy with the way things are going. They haven't been happy for a long time. And I don't think that we can underestimate the degree to which immigration is a major motivating factor.
Stop for a second. I'm so glad. I did not want to tee that up. I didn't want to plant the seed, but you just put your finger on it. Expand, please.
So Nigel Farage, I think people would do themselves a good favor if they check out just some of the clips from the debate that he had. Where they've got, the representatives of all these different parties up on stage together, and he is giving this argument about mass migration and about how they have, essentially an experience in Britain where you have such a high percentage of people who are walking around who weren't there, just a few years ago, that they've really seen the country change, and that this is not something that their current, established, government is really built to handle. And when it comes to social services, when it comes to all of the different things, that they deal with on a regular basis. And, we should not underestimate the historic nature of this moment. To have Reform pull ahead of the Tories is really just an absolute indictment of everything that they've done under their leadership in the post-Johnson era, but even during Johnson as well, to fail to match up with what the people elected them to do.
And let me point out for people, the Steelers fans, Ben, the Tories have been one of the two historic parties in Great Britain since the Parliament shared power with the King and the House of Lords. The Tories have been there, and the Whigs are dead. They're gone, and Labour rose and replaced the Liberals, but the Tories have stayed there. Reform, I'll talk with Larry Arnn about this next hour, Reform is now in second place. They will be the opposition.
Yes, and in fact, look, I mean, Farage was asked whether he would lead a party of the right that combined some elements of the Tories with reforms, and he said yes, but he also said, but he wouldn't be interested in leading the Tories. He wouldn't be interested in leading the Tories as they're currently composed. And I think that that's something that speaks to the dysfunction of the right generally in offering a response to what people actually want. And we can't underestimate how much migration is motivating this. And when it comes to Donald Trump, people, I think, underestimate how much the border chaos, crime, instability, and general feelings of chaos, and, of course, the fentanyl crisis are all lumped together in people's minds as part of one thing now. In a way,
Ben, are you worried about the 8
past.
Tajiks who were ISIS connected that were waved through the border? They were, quote, encountered, they were, quote, vetted, and now the FBI's got them in custody of ICE again because they're connected with ISIS. I mean, that's Moscow all over again. That is a disaster.
Absolutely. It's a disaster, but it's also an indictment of our systems in the sense that we no longer have confidence institutionally in these systems that we used to be able to regard as under, regardless of who was in charge, that they had a job to do and that they were able to do it, that they were able to function. People no longer have that faith or have that confidence. And that confidence, I think, is something that is lacking not just here, but around Europe as well. And that's why they're turning away from this type of leadership. And we saw the first seeds of it, really happening in Italy and in the past. And by the way, think about all the crazy headlines that were written about Meloni at the time.
Yes.
Crazy headlines that just try to depict her in ways that were completely factually absurd and false if you paid attention to anything that she was really saying. And
look at the headline in the New York Times this morning. France is on the brink of something terrifying, like Le Pen is Hitler. It's crazy.
It's absolutely crazy. And the thing is, again, we circle back to what we were talking about in the last segment, that they no longer have the power to make claims like that and have people automatically believe them. They've been proven wrong so many times that these major media corporations, people tune them out and they pay attention to what they really want and who they believe can deliver on those priorities.
Ben, what's the name of your podcast? Because I think people need to go and listen to it.
As the complicated name, Ben Domenech Podcast.
Yeah, that's a very but follow him on X at @Domenech. Go listen to his podcast because he's got his finger on the pulse here. There's a convulsion coming across the free world. Ben knows it.